ladies and gentlemen. Again, welcome to Ukraine Crisis Media Center for the next press briefing. It's going to be done by activists of public initiative Reanimation Package on reforms. We will have with us Ms. Hanna Hopko, NGO Center Live, Svitana Zalishchuk, NGO Center UA, Oleh Maceh, business owner, and Olha Halabala, civic secretary of Euromaydan. Proszę.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start this press conference, and Natalia, thank you for the introduction. First of all, let me announce the topic of this press conference. We would like to talk about the reforms for a new president. And the aim of this event, actually, to express the expectations of civil society, of analytical centers, of experts who have been working on these reforms and changes in the country. And also, the participants have been introduced already, and I will later give them a floor, and every participant will talk about its topic. I would like also to speak a little bit about who do we represent. There is an initiative which is called Reanimation Package of Reform, which was born in January, in the middle of the Euromaydan events. And that time, the idea was to redirect the protest energy of the civil society into the constructive demand. We believe that to kick out Yanukovych out of his position is not enough. And it's not the end, it's just the beginning. But the real change will come only if we will manage to realize real and efficient reforms in this country. So we're going to talk about the reforms. One of the main messages that we brought here, talking to you, to foreign journalists, to Ukrainian journalists, is that we see the new elected president as a strong partner in the realization, in the adoption and then implementation of important legislation that we as civil society has been working for a number of years. Then we also would like to say that actually we see three key points that we expect Petro Poroshenko will do as his first step being a president, that he will open up, that he will introduce much more transparency and openness during his being in the power. Second of all, he will introduce all necessary institutions and legislation in order to enable civil society control over the government. And thirdly, we expect development, and we believe that dramatic economic reforms will enable these development and economic prosperity. Well, I will start as a former journalist, as a journalist. I will start probably the first step that journalists and media community is expecting from Mr. Poroshenko to be done. And we believe that, first of all, we need public broadcasting system. As you know, this legislation has been lately adopted, but we need a full implementation of this reform. Secondly, we really need the legislation on the transparency of media ownership. As you know, the main TV channels, the main media in Ukraine are owned by oligarchs or by rich people and under their control. And without this reform, we won't be sure that censorship will not come back again. Then third thing that we believe is necessary is we expect that National Council on the issue of TV and radio will be formed from the civil society experts, from the media experts, independent media, independent people who will be able to ensure that this regulator body works independently. And finally, we do believe that in order for Poroshenko to be an independent and leader with the new rules, with the new culture, he has to sell a fifth channel, his channel, and not to control this media outlet. This is a crucial thing for the freedom of speech and development of information sphere. With this, I would like to give the floor to Hanna Hopko, to tell us a little bit about the reforms of judicial system, as well as of law enforcement, police, and also general prosecutor officer. Please.
Thank you, Svitlana. So actually, I would like to introduce a little bit about our initiative Reanimation Package of Reforms. So we started publicly in March 7th, and we united more than 150 experts from different analytical centers, think tanks, groups. So actually, our initiative is working as a platform that developing legislation, actually advocating this legislation, and implementing the law. So far, we managed to pass 6 very important legislation in the parliament. One of the legislation is access to the public information. Second one is the public law on access to the public procurement. This is very important law. And another very important law, this is on visa liberalization, some changes to criminal courts. And also another very important law that was passed in the parliament is law on public broadcasting. So we have a successful experience within the last 3 months working with parliament and passing several very important legislation. And also we established an interfaction parliamentary group, the platform of reforms in the parliament that consists of 28 MPs in the parliament. Besides, we have a center of supporting reforms in the cabinet of ministers, and this is really very important instrument for civil society organization to be a partners and to promote the reforms and to pass the emergency steps that has to be done in Ukraine. We are focusing on such priorities like anti-corruption, decentralization and regional development, administrative reform, election system reform, tax reform, and reform of judiciary system, law enforcement reform, and police reform, and prosecutor office reforms. We think this is very important reforms and steps that has to be done in Ukraine to reanimate the country. And after some experience of partnership with parliament and Ukrainian government, now we are thinking about establishing another and cooperation with president and his administration. So for us, it's really very important to be a part of appointment, like civil society participation of the person who is in president's responsibility, like Minister of Defense, Ministry of, not Minister, also Radnik, advisor of National Security and Defense Office. And actually, we do hope that President will be transparent and involve civil society when this very important position will be, he will appoint. And also, it's very important when we started our reanimation package of reforms, now it's very important to get a support from President's side, especially in such sensitive issues like judiciary reform that is a key of system, because Maidan started as a Maidan of or revolution of dignity, and now it turns into the revolution of effectiveness, and reforms is one of the important instruments. So what do we expect from presidents in the sphere of judiciary reforms? We expect that he will limit his authorities informing the judges system in Ukraine, especially by amendments to constitution, and actually limit his authorities, and especially the higher court of justice, he will not be responsible for appointing some judges. As for the reform of police, we already introduced our vision how police should be reformed, and actually we do expect that President will support our initiative. And also, as you know, Council of Europe and Venice Commission expect in the second reading that law on prosecutor office will be voted, and we also expect that President will support our initiative. And it's really very important that President will start his work considering civil society as a partners, and this constructive energy will unite and will send a message to the East and will help to unite East and West in the country. And before we developed such agenda, weekly agenda for parliamentaries, and this is like one plenary session agenda. And today we also develop a first step that we expect from as a civil society group that unite more than 150 experts, that President will also listen to our recommendations and consider us as a partners. Thank you.
Hello. I want to explain you about very important part of reform. This is economical reforms. We have few directions that we make and we will open to President, and we try to control President to check these reforms. It's the main important things, tax reforms. This is simplifying administration taxes and reducing number of taxes. In the result, we will get simplified of accounting and reduce corruption in this direction. Second thing, it's change relations between taxpayers and fiscal authorities. Now it's business in total under control of fiscal authorities, and every time we have in these parts a lot of sanction, corruption, and we want to change these to put against this total under control situation, under control, to change for consultant and assistant of business to get trust between these fiscal authorities and taxpayers. Next thing is deregulation of business activity. We need to change principle of permit. If every time to get some business we get a lot, we need to get a lot of permits to change for declaration. In this case, we want to change Soviet system, Soviet mentality, to change like a government. Like government pressure, government control, to change for personal responsibility of business. And last direction, we want to adapt European norm to European norm. Our law in competition standard in competition law, our standard in custom regulation, standard in technical regulation, and standard in food safety. In this case, we will open possibility not just our business to have a very good climate here, but we will get investment from outside of Ukraine. Thank you.
My name is Olha Halabala, as well the activist of the Reanimation Reforms Package, and we want to talk about 5 more vital reforms we are very expecting from the President. The first one is anti-corruption reform. Actually, within the Reanimation Reforms Package, we managed already to push the Parliament to pass the anti-corruption legislation for visa liberalization process, the public procurement legislation, and the law of Ukrainian access to public information. But we vitally need at least 2 more laws that are so far not passed in the Parliament. It's Law in Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Bureau as the body which will control the high-level corruption, and the law in Ukraine on open real estate registers. This was the legislation which was failed by the Parliament when they were voting for this. The next reform is the constitutional reform. As you know, we have the first draft of the constitutional amendments sent from the Parliament to the Venice Commission. But unfortunately, this process was very closed. So the group of 15 MPs were working in the Parliament on the constitutional amendments, but the civic society was not involved in this. The mass media was not involved in this. The public discussion was not holding on. So we do demand the open process of the constitutional reform with the involvement of the civic society. We think that the president should create the special commission where will be the scientists, civic society representatives, and experts who would say the word on the constitutional reform. The third one is election reform. Actually, when we see the results of the Kyiv elections, we see that the majoritarian system is the basic for the corruption, because most of the guys who entered the Kyiv city council, they were the majoritarian candidates. Actually, they were those who were from the Party of Regions, who were the secretaries of the land commissions, etc. So the first thing we demand is the open list proportional system. This is the first thing that should be adopted by the Parliament and by the President. The next thing, we would ask the President to assist on the early parliamentary election, because this Parliament is already not effective. And this Parliament was voting for the laws on the 16th of January. The third thing in the election reform is lowering the entrance barrier. We need the new political parties having a chance to enter the parliament. And with the barrier of 5%, we have a very small chances of these political players. The next one, we need the transparency of political party finances and the transparency of the election funds. This is actually in this law on the transparency of the election funds was failed in the parliament before the president's election, and it was the law which was demanded by the Chestnut movement. Svitana Zalishchuk is running. So this is about the election reform. The next one is the decentralization reform. It's obviously the one thing that we crucially needing to give the more power to the local communities. And the last one is the administrative reform. We need the totally reforming of the we need the totally reforms in the ministries. We need the reform of the state service, and within this administrative reform, we as the Reanimation Package of reforms already demanded the center of administrative services to be as the one window on the one window system working. So, but there's much more to do in this administrative reform. So basically, this is the 5 more reforms the president to be done as the priority. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you for our experts, but I also would like to add one more very important thing. You see only 4 of us, but we are talking on behalf of much bigger community, of more than 50, as Hanna Hopko already has mentioned, NGOs and analytical centers. And there are at least 11 working groups, and they have their leading experts that you can also contact further in order to get details on at what stage that another reform is and what should be done and how do they see the development of that. But I also would like just to introduce that there are a couple of people here in this room who are doing these important things together with us. So there is Vadim Miskey and Oksana Nechepurenko from our team, and Lyubova Kulenko, who is working on European integration, and Oleh Hetman, who is there far at the table, who else? And Natalia Sokolenko, of course, one of the prominent journalists in Ukraine. So these people are also involved. There are many more. They are also happy to answer your questions online, or we can provide you with the
Запитання які є? В правах модератора задам таке запитання. Дуже багато чого зроблено вже вашою ініціативою, так, як це називається зараз. З іншого боку, ми розуміємо про те, що прийняття таких законів, в принципі, будь-яких законів в Україні – це дуже довгий і складний процес. Чи можете ви в 2 словах розказати про те, які способи впливу на структури урядові, на Верховну Раду і на всіх інших, хто до цього причетний, ви сьогодні маєте, і якими методами користуєтеся для того, аби сталося так, як ви хочете, а не так, як воно завжди стається?
Should I continue in English or Ukrainian then? I wonder.
I have no idea we have any way off.
Okay, maybe then in English, because we started it and we invited foreign journalists first of all. So there, first of all, we, as has been said already, we developed several hands or shoulders which we use for our pressure and for the lobbying of our legislation efficiently. First of all, we established this interparliamentary group within the parliament that was formed by 3 factions together with independent MPs, and we meet regularly, basically every plenary session week, and we develop together the agenda that you have seen, we were showing to you, that we come to the Speaker of the Parliament and we disseminate to every single MP that is working in the Parliament, and this is what we every week demand from the parliamentarians to adopt. That's first thing. Secondly, we had also negotiations with the cabinet of the ministers, and we managed to establish this efficient cooperation center, which engages several ministers, in particular Mr. Simarak, and we are very thankful that he has this political will to cooperate with civil society, but also together with Minister of Justice and Minister Groisman, the Minister of the Regional Development, and those legislation that should go through the government institutions. So we cooperate with those ministers and those ministries, exactly. Then another thing is that we obviously learned how to use every possible public pressure. And we work very actively with social networks, and I just want to remind you that we have this Euromaydan Facebook page, which is the biggest Facebook page in the history of Ukrainian Facebook and social network in general, and they support this initiative, so they keep on posting what we do and popularize and mobilize people if we need support. Also, we cooperate on the very good level with journalists, with media in Ukraine. We have been partners for years. We were together demanding these changes. So now media do understand how important it is to deliver this message from the civil society to the power and to the government. So they keep on making interviews, materials, and cover our activity. And finally, I want to say that as many people keep on saying that Euromaidan hasn't finished yet, and it still is living in our hearts and in our heads. And for many people who left the streets, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's over. And people are ready to go in front of the parliament, and if needed, they are ready to stand there and demand if, for example, some legislations have failed. So this is what we had already previously in the past, with some of the laws that have not been adopted from the first attempt. Many thousands of people were coming to the parliament and expecting and demanding from the parliament to adopt that or another law. So this is more or less our instruments of how we promote the reforms in the country.
Дякую. Запитання?
Дмитро Шинкарук, Українські національні новини. От ви тут описали багато різних реформ, а от щось саме про галузь освіти, яка, в принципі, ну, без чого, без реформи якої абсолютно це все неможливо, бо як в того міліціонера буде любов до України, до свого народу, якщо його вчили абсолютно іншим методом. Так? Ну, це як на прикладі. Тобто, чи не вважаєте ви, що реформа саме освіти має бути одною з першочергових?
Thank you for your questions. Actually, the education reform is one of the priority in our reanimation package of reforms. But we have like key priorities that I mentioned before, like anti-corruption, decentralization, reform of police, and reform of prosecutor office and judicial system. This is that really unite and need to be done right now. Emergency steps just to unite the country. And also we have separate groups like stabilization reforms, healthcare reform, education reform, land and agrarian reform. So actually our groups is developing legislation. And good news is that the law on higher education was passed in the first reading in April, at the beginning of April. And our experts were one of the working group's member who developed amendments to the second reading. It was more than 900 amendments, and we were working together with Lila Grinevich, the head of education committee, profile committee at Verkhovna Rada, and we do hope as parliamentaries will be gathered this Thursday or next week, and we will push them to pass in the second reading. It means that adopt this law on the higher educations in general, and it will be our first step in education reform. So far we managed to pass in first reading law on higher educations. And also I wanted to mention that, answering on your question, that the system is resisting. And actually this is really higher, and it's hard to pass legislation, and the window of opportunities is closing. And for example, when we passed this law on returning the trust to the judiciary system, lustration of the judges, in the beginning of April, last week, more than 76 MPs from Party of Regions signed their appeal to the Constitutional Court with demand to nominate our law as anti-constitutional. And also another MP from Udar party registered their amendments to our law to weaken our law in position. So actually we are not so optimistic, and we understand that actually a lot of MPs and a lot of people in the cabinet of ministers, a lot of people around president's team, they are the same people from the system, they are children of the system. So actually civil society has to be very strong and actually to increase the demands and actually propose the positive agenda, constructive, because we are considering parliament, government, and presidential administration in the future as a partnership. In case if they are starting blocking or delaying or our proposition, of course we will do advocacy instruments. Because, for example, we were standing from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m., more than 500 people near the parliament, when the law on judges was considered in the first reading in the parliament.
Дякую. Ще запитання?
Will Schreiber, Kyiv Post, this is about economic reforms. Ukraine's new head tax officer said that VAT scams and other sorts of VAT exploitations were robbing Ukraine's economy of almost, I think he said 20%. Is VAT tax reform on your plate now?
About VAT tax reforms, we understand in Europe is work VAT, and we could recommend cancel this if we want to go to European community. We understand, but the problem of VAT for today is the administration of this. This is very strong and very difficult, and we, our experts, make work in some very interesting administrative VAT reforms, that it's no corruption, it's very easy, step by step, we understand how VAT works. It's a little bit different like European administration, it's something between few countries, they take experience and make this. And in this case, it will be very easy. First start, it's, for example, 7% take VAT, and after 17. But this is just working products. It's not yet a final version. Some expert told that it should be cancelled completely VAT. But we understand problem, and we should think about to go to European standards and to find our own VAT system. Thank you.
Дякую.
Could you please tell me a little bit about the priorities? Because I see in the list of reforms that there are reform of that should be on the first place, to probably to the reform that should be on the second and the next. Because as far as I understand, reform of the media sector is quite important, but should it be in the top 10 priority for the next president? So please tell me about the priorities.
In this case, maybe I will start shortly, and then my colleagues will continue. It is important to understand that we didn't start these reforms from the scratch, And many of the legislation are already either adopted, for example, in the first hearing, or introduced in the parliament, or registered in the parliament, or have been at the working groups in the cabinets of ministers. That's first thing. So a lot of work have been done already before, once again, not only by the efforts of the civil society, but together in cooperation with the ministries and in the parliament. And it means that it's not, just a press conference that what we want, but it's rather a briefing of what we have been done and what we should do further in order to ensure effective reforms. This is first thing. Second thing, unfortunately, we're not in the state where we can allow ourselves to make these priorities like this. First, we'll do, for example, we'll reform our constitutions. Secondly, we will introduce economic reform. And finally, we will fight with the corruption. Unfortunately, we are in the state where we have to do that all at the same time. And this is, by the way, is what is also required, let me remind you, by the association agreement and by many of the conditionalities that are there within the state building grant that was given by the European Union, and together with microfinance grant that was also given to the Ukrainian government by EU. And also this is what is the World Bank and IMF from Ukrainian government in order so that Ukrainian government can use the international resources to promote these reforms. But at the same time, we do believe that there are key things that have to be addressed right now, immediately. And we believe that these are reforms that have been demanded from the very beginning of Euromaidan. It's anti-corruption. It is the issue number, not even one, but maybe zero, super one, And then we do think that decentralization is a key thing, because this is not what just have been written in all the programs of the candidates for the presidency, but this is the key issue in order to stabilize situation on the political level, on the whole country. This is what is demanded by East, by West, by South, and North and Center. And also, we do need judicial reform and law enforcement reform, because we think that society finally will become a civil society when this institution will stop being repressive machines, and people will find a way where have to find a real fairness. So these are our internal priority. But once again, you cannot underestimate the necessity to go forward with other reforms. And that is why I just underline that there are different working groups and different civil society groups that has been formed before in order to promote that and other reforms. So we do it on the parallel level, and we hope that President will be a strong partner with it. One small just thing that we were talking together. As you have seen, the main political slogan of Petro Poroshenko during this presidential campaign was living in a new way. And we, the civil society, elaborated it a little bit. And we think that living in a new way means to be accountable. And we believe that these reforms will make him accountable. Not only him, but the government as parliament as well.
Дякую. Ще запитання? Іду.
Katarzyna Wenzel, OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. I would like to get some more details on the judicial reform and on constitutional reform. Could you please tell us a bit more on the limitation of the presidential powers? It was very interesting to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have the special expert group which is working the constitutional reform, and we can give you the direct contacts of giving in more detailed information. But the situation is that the group of MPs, 15 MPs, who were in the parliament appointed in the Constitutional Commission, they developed in a very close way the first draft of amendments to Constitution. According to those drafts, they again reformed the Supreme Judicial Council, so they reform it. According to these amendments, they limit the president's power. According to these amendments, they do the and they either cancel the city administration or give them just the control power. So this is the basic change that they're discussing, but there's a lot of things that is not in this constitutional amendments. Like there is no mechanism of deputies. Yeah, like when you can call back your deputy. It's the discussion in the society over it should be in the constitution or it shouldn't be. Yeah, but it was not discussed. So basically, we just demand that this constitutional process should be open because they so far gave their first draft offers to the Venice Commission. After we get this back from the Venice Commission, it should be voted in the Parliament. But it's closed so far. We even, the civic society, we don't have even those amendments, so we can analyze them properly. This is the problem. And about the judicial reform, we made the first step. We passed the law on the renewing the trust to the judge system. But as Hanna told, after this, heads of the courts were cancelled from their position, but 70% of them were again appointed by the judges. That's why we need now the complex law in Ukraine on judicial system. We need the constitutional mechanism of forming the Supreme Judicial Council, and only after this we can say that the judicial reform is moving. As well, the other mechanism is the illustration of judges who were breaching the human rights. And this process is now being established because, as you know, according to this law in Ukraine on turning back trust to the court system, the illustration committee of judges was formed, and we still are waiting for the parliament to appoint their 5 people to this committee. And basically this committee should start reviewing cases of judges during the Maidan when they were doing the unlawful, and then any other judges which were making unlawful decisions. So even after this we can say that the reform of the judicial system is starting.
Дякую. Any questions? Ще запитання? Є запитання від мене? Окей.
The issue of decentralization is a very disputable one. How do you see the way it should be happening?
There are 3 stages of the decentralization process. The first one is administrative reform. This administrative reform means that from 490 regions in Ukraine, there should be only 150. So all the regions should be bigger. Out of 12,000 different villages and cities, which we call the communities, there should be only 1,200 communities, so 10 times less. Why is this happening? Because the smallest village in Ukraine is 89 people. And for those 89 people, half of them are working in the local village council. So it makes no possibility self-governments effective. So the first step, it's so-called administrative reform, where the regions and the cities should be transformed and become bigger. In Ukrainian language, we called it ukrupnення. I don't know the correct word for English. So it's the first step. After it happens, but how it should happen, the parliament should give or the cabinet of ministers should give the instruction to the city administration to ask the local communities to say how they want to be united, you know. So which villages with which villages want to form one region. So it's a very complex process, but according to the concept of the decentralization reform, it should happen during 1 month. The next step is the empowerment of the local self-government. We need to give on the local level the education, the healthcare system, the local taxes, so they can administrate the local taxes. As well, we should do the budget reform, that all the taxes are first administrated in the communities, and then they're giving to the more higher levels. And after this, one is the second step, and the third step is the local development reform. Actually, it's the whole complex of economical and other reforms to stimulate local communities for economic development. It starts like in Poland. What they did in Poland they made every small village to have their strategy of development for 10 years. And only after this, they empowered them and give them money. So that's what happened, what should happen in Ukraine as well. It's the third stage of the decentralization reform process.
Okay. Thank you very much for information. Thank you very much for today's briefing. And all the good luck with your beginnings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to say that if you need contacts of our experts, we will be happy to give it. Thank you very, very much.